including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Before we get started into the main portion of our meeting, I'd like to welcome and introduce Councillor Gord Perks. Councillor Perks, you're going to start us off with some opening remarks and then we'll move into the meeting.
Thanks, Diana. And thanks everyone for taking up part of this beautiful evening to join us here to talk about an important, supportive and affordable housing initiative in our neighborhood. I've tried to tell everyone on the panel that Parkdale is a special part of the city and there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm and maybe even some rowdy enthusiasm. So don't let me down. But let's get to work. Let's house more of our neighbors. Thanks for joining.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Perks, and we're looking forward to the discussion. So we're just going to bring up our presentation and I'll share with you our agenda, and so you can have a sense of what's going to be shared this evening and form the basis of our conversation. I would like to just cover with everyone some of the guidelines for respectful dialogue. We are here tonight to hear from everyone who wants to share their perspectives, and we would like to do that in a safe and respectful way. These are meetings that are meant to be safe spaces where everyone can share and listen. And for that reason, discrimination or abusive language of any kind will not be tolerated. And I'm sure we won't need to go down this road, but if we do, it will result in a warning followed by removal from the event. I'm confident, though, that we can have a good discussion around our virtual table, and we're looking forward to that. So here's our agenda for the session. We've just rounded the corner on welcome and introductions, and we're going to hear in a moment from the Housing Secretariat around taking collective action on homelessness. We'll follow that with details about the supportive housing proposed at 150 Dunn. We'll give you a bit of a sense of what it is to build modular housing and what that process entails in terms of its development and timeline. And then we'll turn it over to you as well to think about ways that we could support the success of this building. And there may be some ideas from the group around this virtual table that folks have for how they could welcome new residents and continue to build the success of this site. So before we move into our presentation, I'd like to introduce Abby Bond. She's the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat. Thank you, and I've just realized we've skipped over the instructions for how to raise your hand. I will cover that as we get to the discussion portion. So Abby, for now, we'll turn it over to you. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Diana, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight. As we've already mentioned, this is an important initiative for the City of Toronto, and one of the reasons for that is because this program and this building is focused on our collective action to address homelessness in our city. It is one of the most complex issues that the city is facing and has been significantly worsened by the impact of the pandemic. And it's very important for us that we acknowledge that it really takes everybody coming together to address this issue. So we need yourselves as neighbours, ourselves as the city, and along with our other government partners, the province and the federal government, as well as community groups, residents associations, and also our non-profit housing providers. So in coming together, we will be able to address homelessness and improve the situation for many of our fellow residents. Next slide, please. So as I said, we've seen the situation worsen through the pandemic, and every night in Toronto, we see around 7,800 people experiencing homelessness. So that's living in our parks, living in encampments, and living in our shelter system. And we urgently need new homes with supports so that everybody has a safe, warm place to live. Next slide, please. So as I said, homelessness is a complex issue, and there are many different ways, unfortunately, that people find their way into homelessness. So it could be, and it can be a combination of factors that lead people into this situation. So it could be a job loss or lack of income, and we've certainly seen an increase in that during the pandemic. It could be the people unable to find or keep affordable housing. They may have health issues, physical or mental health issues, along with substance use and addiction. as combined with potentially disabilities as well. And also many people are experiencing racism and other forms of discrimination, all which combine and really lead people into homelessness. Next slide, please. So as part of the city's action on housing and homelessness, we have our 10-year housing plan. And this is really about providing dignity and supporting people's well-being through the provision of housing with supports. Thanks. And so we've been doing this all across the city. So tonight we're here to talk to you about the site in Parkdale, but here is a map showing the city and all of the supportive housing that is currently underway, either through purchase of a site or other modular housing sites. So as you can see, they're spread out in many neighborhoods across the city, which is where also we find people experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're here to talk to you about the site at 150 Dunn Avenue, and we're proposing to build modular housing here with the aim of providing around 51 homes for people with supports to support them, their health and their well-being. And this site, and we'll talk a bit more about the partnership, but the site is actually owned by the University Health Network. So this is an important partnership between the City of Toronto and UHN. And as I said, it takes these kinds of partnerships to really address homelessness. Next slide, please. So what are we proposing to build here? So they are modular homes, but they are new, safe, warm, permanent rental homes. So we're looking to target many groups who experience homelessness, but also seniors, women, Indigenous residents, racialized people, and other people with disabilities, and who may be also at risk of homelessness. So each of the homes that we're providing are studio rental apartments. Each of them have their own bathroom and kitchen, and there's a number of shared amenity spaces in the building, including laundry, a commercial kitchen, a dining area, communal area, as well as programming space, as well as outdoor space as well for people to come together. And I would say just at this point that we've already received some feedback. We've had some good conversations already with some of our community and resident partners in the area. So we've had a discussion with Spunta, and we've already had some feedback about the design of the building and things that people want to see, improvements that people want to see in the building. And I'll let Kevin, who's part of our project and architect team, talk a little bit more about what those specifics are. Okay, next slide, please. So in responding to all the many different ways that people become homeless, it's important that when we provide supports on site, we provide supportive housing, that we have the full range of supports so that we can tailor a support package to people's individual needs. So that means bringing mental health care to people, maybe helping them access income support, assisting doing their laundry, maybe helping them reconnect with family and friends, as well as kind of life training or life skills training or lifelong learning activities. There are many different ways that supportive housing can bring those supports through the staff on site to really help people along their path to wellness and health. Next slide, please. So how does supportive housing work? So all of the services that I just described are really managed and delivered on site by nonprofit housing operators, often in partnership with healthcare providers and operators as well. So the nonprofit housing operators, they bring professional management and building experience, as well as providing customized supports on site. All of the residents in supportive housing have made a choice to live there. They will pay rent like other renters in the community, and they are able to access the supports. And the operator will take care of the residents, the building, and the property, and the relationship with community as well. Next slide, please. So a big part of the success of this building and in making sure that all those support services I mentioned are delivered well and to the benefit of the residents, and this is a great building that fits in with the community, is for us to hire a professional and experienced nonprofit housing provider. So the city we will select an experienced provider to manage this building, and we're looking at a number of criteria, which include, but it's not limited to, the fact that they show that they can be effective in working with the local community and with our local councillor, that they have experience of managing other affordable and supportive housing, that they have a really strong track record in tenant engagement and communications, and also that they have that experience of delivering supports with a range of tenants, including marginalized and vulnerable populations. So those are the things we're looking for, and this operator will be a big part of the success of this building. Next slide, please. And so now I'd like to introduce two of our other panelists who are going to speak to you about the unique partnership that we're developing on this site. So first we have Dr. Andrew Bazari, who's the Executive Director at UHN, and we also have Nation Chung, who's the Vice President of Community Opportunities and Mobilization at the United Way. And so over to you. I don't know which one of you would like to go first.
I'll kick us off and then just hand it over to Andrew. So thank you, Abby. It is a great honor to be part of this partnership. As a partner, signing partner for this work, it is centered in United Way's intention of working at a system level with partners like the City of Toronto and UHN to bring all of the resources, the vision of our health sector leaders, our public sector leaders, and of course, the leadership and community with the not-for-profit service providers to solve what is clearly a priority problem in the GTA and many would say across Canada. So happy to be here and to support this initiative and look forward to the unfolding of the work post this kickoff. So Andrew, over to you.
Thanks so much, Nation, and really, you know, not much to add to speaking about the importance of the partnership. I would just add, you know, we're having some conversations and throughout just how important a partnership like this that looks beyond the hospital and healthcare was pre-pandemic, but how much the pandemic has exposed the importance around homelessness as a public health crisis, the overdose crisis as a major public health concerning crisis, and all of the compounding crises that are happening in our city with respect to income inequality, the overdose crisis, housing, and the disproportionate impact of COVID really widening and exacerbating all of that. And so, you know, going to the discussion, really just in terms of where UHN's involvement is understanding, you know, what's happened through the pandemic and the work that's been done with community partners from testing and vaccines to commitments to being here from the learnings from community about how important housing is on this and how there needs to be longstanding commitments to housing and health given the crisis at hand.
Great. Well, thank you very much to everyone who's presented so far, and we're going to now move into the discussion portion. I just was hoping that we could perhaps share how to raise your hand if anybody would like that information. So Mercedes, are you able to just bring that slide back up that we skipped over at the beginning? And want to make sure that if anybody has a question or a comment that they'd like to share with this group, that you just raise your hand and we'll keep a speaking order. And we have our first comment coming from Tiffany. All right, Tiffany, please go ahead. Just unmute you there 1 second. Sorry, Tiffany, just give me one moment here. Maybe I will just turn to my colleague to see if they can support me with the... Oh, there we go. Tiffany, my apologies. I think we've got it. Oh. Nope, there you just, we're remuted. Sorry, Tiffany, we'll get this sorted out in just a moment here. Okay, please go ahead, Tiffany.
Oh, hello, good evening.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good evening. I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. I acknowledge that I am a urban Toronto Indigenous community member and also a helper here in the city. I help a lot of Indigenous homeless men and women. And so I'm wondering, with this new project that is about to happen, which sounds great, there seems to be quite mentioning of Indigenous peoples who would be able to access these units. However, as stated, there isn't any nonprofit providers, as the tender hasn't gone out. But I'm wondering, are we able to create a policy that whoever gets the housing project as the housing provider, can we please get a commitment from the city that there will be 10 units allocated for Indigenous homeless people? Because I'm finding that there isn't a guarantee as we wait for whoever is chosen. But as we look through the criteria, I don't feel quite confident that there's an Indigenous housing provider that meets that criteria. So by default, we know that it's going to be a non-profit service provider who is non-Indigenous. So I would like to find out, who do I need to speak to? Selena Young, to get a commitment that 10 of those 51 units will be allocated to Indigenous homeless men or women. Thank you. And can I get that commitment, please?
I will turn that over to, oh, sure, Councillor Perks.
Sure. Hey, Tiffany, how you doing?
Good, you?
So I'm okay. I'm okay. So just to be clear, there are some Indigenous housing providers who absolutely would qualify under these terms. We've got projects in Parkdale with Name Res, for example. So that's a possibility. But there's a separate stream also that the city's undertaking to get Indigenous-led supportive housing projects going. And I think that's actually a really great model. I know that the Aboriginal Affairs Committee has been doing some work on that. But to your point about this site specifically, well, I can't say that we're going to put quotas on particular groups. That the effort is very much to think about people who've been socially marginalized. When, you know, in all the conversations I've had about social medicine in this project. So I can't give you a number. I can say, yes, there are Indigenous providers who are out there who would qualify and could apply if they wanted to, and that the city does have a stream of trying to create supportive housing for the Indigenous community in Toronto.
So I'm wondering, because I know that the Indigenous Affairs is planning on, or the Aboriginal Affairs Committee is having a meeting this Friday, and although this isn't on the agenda item, I am wondering, because I am actually trying to obtain a seat on the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. And so I feel that Selena Young, although you feel maybe Name Res will take the project, they're not going to. You know why? Because it's not Indigenous specific for the entirety. And I feel
Right.
it's not going to meet the narrative. And although we have a project that's coming out and all these initiatives, it doesn't go to addressing how we can get specific allocation, because here in Parkdale, we have a lot of Indigenous homeless people. In fact, the Parkdale Queen West Four Winds program, they also have been doing great, tremendous work over the course of this COVID period. And I feel that that guarantee of 10, irregardless of who the service provider is, will provide more opportunities for the street, the ones that are doing the work. And I'm not dismissing Name Res. I just feel that we need to be more transparent to include other grassroots people who are doing amazing things and not getting a lot of credit.
So,
Absolutely. Tiffany, can I make this commitment to you? I'll take it up with Selena because I don't know the details of the Indigenous housing stream perfectly, and I can't remember it all right now. But I'll take it up with Selena and try to make sure that within the overall supportive housing project that we're doing and some of the housing projects that we're doing in Parkdale, that your concern gets met. I'll make that commitment to you, okay?
Well, I
And-
appreciate your commitment because I will also be speaking to Selena in regards to this as well, in addition
Great.
to other things that have been going on. So I know that I've emailed you a couple times and you have never gotten back to me. Being a Parkdale
Oh.
Indigenous community member, maybe you missed the email or it went in your junk mail. But I find when we're having these discussions and dialogue about Indigenous people, Indigenous is a word we're not going to use to get more funding, whether we want to or not. We're going to include that there's an allocation specific for Indigenous within these projects. Every single one. If Indigenous is in anything that has to do with the city, that's a non-Indigenous project, there should be a specific allocation. Why Selena doesn't do it or why we haven't talked about it is another discussion, not tonight. I'm not going to take the floor anymore, but I acknowledge that there's a lot more work and a lot more voices that want to be heard and need to be heard. So miigwech.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I will just turn it over to Abby, who's wanting to share, I think, a little bit more information there. Thanks, Abby.
And thanks for the question. It is something we're working with Selena on. So the Housing Secretariat team and the Indigenous Affairs Office have been meeting with Indigenous housing providers to further expand some of the actions that we identified in our plan and to come up with some strategies about how we do create more Indigenous housing in Toronto. We actually did agree with the group that at least a minimum of 5,000 of the 40,000 new units that we'll be creating over the next 10 years will be for Indigenous providers and for Indigenous people as a minimum. And that was done with the kind of consultation and engagement of that Indigenous housing group. So we'll take away this request and have further discussions with that group, and we'll be able to circle back with you and the interest. I'm sure there's interest generally in the community about how we make these buildings make a difference in relation to Indigenous homelessness. So we're very committed to that.
The Aboriginal Affairs Committee was very much looking forward to the Housing Secretariat meeting. At one of their meetings, it was on the agenda and the Housing Secretariat wasn't there. And I know that I witnessed that there was lots of executive directors wondering why the Housing Secretariat isn't there. And so I'm wondering if you are making the commitment on behalf of the Secretariat, then you need to make the commitment to create that communication that she actually show up to the meetings when she's supposed to. Just saying on a side note, and including getting back to community members who are trying to advocate for their own other things. I know that Catherine Gandy has been making many attempts to speak to the Housing Secretariat, and I'm taking these forums because in form of Indigenous Month and in proclamation of what we're going through, I think the community needs to be heard, and we come through these avenues to ensure that our voices are heard, as with ensuring that there's a change in how the Aboriginal Affairs and the Indigenous Office is doing things to help our people. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from the Housing Secretariat, and so is Catherine Gandy. So I'm going to not take up too much of the time.
Thanks, Tiffany. Appreciate the comments. All right, let's go to our next speaker, and that is Manuel. Manuel, please go ahead.
Yes, many of our residents go together, and Susie Morrison is the one that has the questions for everyone. So if you can just allow Susie Morrison to go ahead, please.
Okay, they're next in line, so I'll just go right to Susie. Thank you. All right, please go ahead, Susie.
Hi, thank you, Diana, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Susie Morrison, and I'm speaking on behalf of the South Parkdale Residents Association. I'm just going to go through some material that we put together when we met on Monday evening. We are a group of homeowners in South Parkdale. We are community driven and we support many community initiatives. We're not strangers to the issues of homelessness, mental health, or addiction. We want to note that we are taxpayers and we're voters. And what we expect is transparency and consultation regarding major initiatives that will impact our community. As far as I'm aware, this has been our first opportunity for community engagement regarding the initiative of the 51 modular homes. I'm afraid that we don't share the same enthusiasm that our councillor has indicated We fully support this concept of supportive housing. We fully understand the need for accommodations for the homeless in the city. Our point here is that we feel that this particular area already has a very high density of what I'm going to call affordable housing from this point forward. But when I say that, I mean subsidized, assisted, or group homes. What we did was we examined an area that's bounded by Dunn Avenue, Close Avenue, Springhurst Avenue, and Queen Street. And we just took a look at how many subsidized dwellings are in that area. There are a total of 40 subsidized dwellings in this 2-block area. 13 of these are owned and operated by the hospital, of which 2 are daycare facilities. 2 are multi-bed hospital buildings at 130 and 150 Dunn Avenue, and 9 are subsidized houses or group homes on Dunn Avenue, Close Avenue, and Springhurst, where residents are paying below market rents. 2 of those properties have been boarded up in excess of 20 years due to neglect. Of the remaining 27 properties in this 2-block area, 4 are large multi-unit subsidized dwellings. There's Phoenix Place, which has 136 units for persons facing poverty, disabilities, and/or aging. Bonar Parkdale has 72 units and is a non-for-profit seniors residence. 245 Dunn Avenue, which is managed by Loft or operated by Loft, has over 400 subsidized units for persons experiencing mental illness and/or addiction issues. Initially, this building was assigned for assisting seniors that were facing mental illness and/or addiction issues, but clearly it's no longer just for seniors. There's also a co-op on Dunn Avenue, which spans through the block to Cowan Avenue, and it has at least 100 subsidized units providing affordable housing for seniors. If you do the math, there are over 1,000 subsidized, assisted, affordable housing units in this 2-block area, servicing persons with mental health issues, addiction, disabilities, and seniors, with another 192-bed facility planned for the hospital. This contrasts to the 100 private homes belonging to taxpayers in the same area. This is a 10-to-1 ratio of subsidized assisted units to private homes. And I will note that some of those private homes are divided up into smaller units, and often these are also considered affordable housing. It's also imperative to note within this 2-block area, there are 2 primary schools, 1 secondary school, of which many students are coming from families experiencing challenges relating to poverty and marginalization. There are at least 3 daycares. There are 2 parks. There's a playing field and tennis courts that are always locked. The playing field and the tennis courts, I'm not sure if you have to make an appointment, but the tennis courts are already in disrepair. The nets are falling down. They're always locked. In addition to this little 2-block area, we are very close to 3 nearby respite centers, 1 in Liberty Village and 2 in the CNE. Other things that we are concerned about are the number of incidents that have been happening in this area. There have been weapons charges, stabbings. There was a man found masturbating in a resident's backyard, surrounded by children's books. There have been many break-ins and thefts, including mail and package theft. And this was all caught on video. So this is not anecdotal information. These are scenarios where people have been charged or arrested. We have endured years of poorly managed construction projects at the hospital site, which means for us as residents in a quiet residential area, there are large trucks, noise pollution, air pollution, excess litter, and a very serious rat infestation. With the planned addition of the 192-bed facility, we know that we will face years of construction ahead. And we also want to note that the hospital, while in many ways is a terrific neighbor, is sometimes a negligent property owner and terrible at managing construction projects. As I pointed out before, there were several homes that were torn down in this neighborhood on Dunn Avenue, and there are several that are boarded up due to neglect, the 2 properties at 1 and 3 Close Avenue. The City of Toronto and our councillor have not been supportive of our concerns regarding expansion of the hospital facility, street cleanliness, or calls for increased policing. Just to summarize and conclude, this residents association does not support the addition of 51 modular units at 150 Dunn Avenue, as we feel the density of subsidized assisted affordable housing is already too high and unmanageable. The city should be looking to lower the density, not increase it, and look elsewhere to accommodate the proposed modular housing units. We know that in other areas where high densities of low-income housing exist, it just doesn't work in the long run. However, we also understand the need to address the crisis of homelessness in our area. Just to reiterate what our expectations are, we are interested in transparency and consultation regarding major initiatives that will impact our community, including the 51 modular units at the 150 Dunn site. We expect safe streets with regards to both crime and traffic, and we also expect our streets, sidewalks, and parks to be clean and well maintained and free of rat infestations. In order to meet our expectations and to maintain direct and transparent communication, we would like a commitment from the city and UHN to meet with our South Parkdale Residents Association on a regular basis regarding the modular housing units and future developments on UHN property. We've also assembled a number of questions. The first question, which I think is burning in everyone's mind, is this a proposal or is this something that is a done deal? No pun intended. And are we going ahead with these 51 modular units regardless of community input?
All right, so why don't we start with your question there, Susie? Just one moment. Councillor Perks, is that something you'd like to respond to, or Abby?
Sure. No, I'd be happy to respond to that. First of all, hello. This is the first time I've ever had communications from a group calling themselves the South Parkdale Residents Association. There's a group called the Parkdale Residents Association that I've been working with on community projects in this part of the neighborhood for 15 years. They're well aware of this and they've been engaged. You want to become engaged, that's great too. I'll tell you that there is a large group of your neighbors who live on Close and on Dunn, who we actually have already had a full consultation meeting with on this issue.
Those neighbors are tenants in the hospital-owned buildings.
They're your neighbors, they're people, just like you.
Yes, we know that, and they participated in our meeting the other night.
Would you like my answer?
Yes,
Okay.
sure.
Great. Okay. So in terms of the locked tennis court and stuff like that, that's Toronto District School Board property, and I'll happily take that up with them. I've been trying to get that unlocked for a while. In terms of rats, to my, thank you for raising that. I'll look into that. In terms of your question about whether this is a done deal, let's be clear. The proposal from the city and the UHN is to do something through what's called a ministerial zoning order. So we're going to go to the province and say, because the city of Toronto has 7,000 or so people who are without homes right now, we don't want to go through the regular 2-year planning process. We want to do it in an expedited fashion. So the city is advocating that we push this through quickly. I'll be very frank about that. When we're doing planning, when we're planning a new building, the reason that the planning process generally takes longer is because we have questions about what the built form impacts will be. Will a new tall building shadow a park? Will it generate a whole lot of traffic? Those are planning questions. A thing the planning process never does, ever, is to talk about who lives in a place. If you talk to any community planner, anybody in the planning profession, they will say, we don't zone people. Because the history is when governments have tried to zone people, you get things like redlining, which says that nobody whose original heritage is in Africa can live in this neighborhood. So the planning process never looks at the question of who lives where. So we're not shortchanging you in any way on that. If you have a concern that this 4-story building would create a shadow on your property, that would be a planning question. I didn't hear anything like that. Finally, housing is a human right. And and in my mind, that means we apply it equally to all humans. So if you want to have conversations about who can move in and be your neighbor, then logically we would have a public meeting when you bought your house, which we didn't. So I'm not concerned in any way by the issues that you've raised. We have been consulting, and this will be an expedited process.
And can I continue on with some of the other questions that the group had then?
Susie, maybe can I give you one more question, and then we'd like to move on. There's quite a few people who have their hands up as well. So why don't you go forward with one more question, and then we'll make sure that we've heard from a few more folks.
I'm just going to see if I can find the most burning question here.
Sure.
And I just wanted to reiterate, I don't think our comments are around who is living there. I think our concern is that we're adding more density of a certain type of housing to an area that's already saturated with it. I guess the big question is, what does modular housing mean? Is this temporary housing, or is this something that's going to deteriorate very quickly and become an eyesore, or is this something that we're going to see as part of our community for the long term?
So I'll take that. And these are questions that I raised because I want to make sure that any housing that's built in our community is of high quality. And as Abby will tell you, I've been riding her since day one. This is not like trailer park housing. This is meant to be permanent. We've actually, because I've been pushing on this, had some meetings with the city's chief building official and with Abby to get reassurances that this is permanent housing, and that this is permanent housing where, as part of the bid process we're going to have for the housing provider, we're laying out that they have to have a building maintenance fund so that the quality of the housing is maintained over time. I still have a few unanswered questions because I'm not familiar with these lasting the 50, 100 years, but it's very deliberately being designed with those questions in mind. And this is something you and I share. I want to make sure that whatever we build there is of the highest quality, and that the not-for-profit provider is required to demonstrate that they're allocating money every year for long-term maintenance of the heating, ventilating system, of the roof, and all of that stuff.
Thank you for that. And then in relation to that question, there was also a comment around the slide that you presented showing the location of the modular housing shows that it's not actually in the parking lot, which is how it has been positioned in the flyer and in the media. We keep hearing about this modular housing going into the parking lot at 150 Dunn. It's actually not at 150 Dunn, it's at 130 Dunn, and the slide indicates that this will be on green space.
Can I suggest that we maybe come back to that after we do the next part of the presentation, as Kevin and the team are going to get into a little bit more detail about the site and the modular housing proposals.
Great, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Susie. All right, let's go on to our next speaker, and that is Hope. Please go ahead, Hope.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a member of Spunta. When I joined this caring, creative, and compassionate community 12 years ago, I was embraced and welcomed. At age 85, I can tell you that I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, and I owe it all to the members of this community, which has existed here for over 30 years. We would like the opportunity to welcome and embrace our new neighbors in the modular housing in the same way, and we look forward to your support in achieving this goal. Please let us help. We are both ready and able and have many skills. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hope. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks. And we're going to move on to our next participant, and this is Adam. Hi, Adam. Please go ahead.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening. Could you please reiterate how this is situated within the broader Parkdale Lakeside UHN campus redevelopment and revitalization project? Is this phase one of a multi-phase redevelopment and revitalization? My apologies if this was covered already. I missed the first few minutes when I was trying to connect to the call. There was a delay with the internet lag. And then also, I'm wondering if there are plans for the historic houses that UHN owns on the campus at 1 to 15 Close Avenue, as well as on Dunn Avenue and Springhurst Avenue. I realize this may be outside the scope of this specific modular supportive housing project, but I would like to iterate that it would be great if these historic houses could be retained and restored as part of the broader campus revitalization project.
Hey, Adam, it's George. No worries on that account, missing the first couple minutes. The meeting we're having tonight is very discreetly about the the modular housing project. There's going to be a larger planning exercise that we do for what happens with the whole rest of the site, including the buildings that you've mentioned. Fair enough?
Yeah, thank you.
Great to hear
Thanks,
from you.
Adam. All right, we're going to go now to Sarah. Sarah, please go ahead. Oh, Sarah, can you hear us? Sarah, just checking to see if you are ready to make your comment. All right, Sarah, I'll come back to you. I see your microphone is on, but perhaps you stepped away. So we'll come back to you in just a moment, and I'll go now to Esther. All right, Esther, please go ahead.
Hey, thank you. My name is, can you hear me well?
Yes.
My name is Esther Townshend, and I'm a UHN tenant on Close Avenue and a member of the South Parkdale UHN Tenants Association. As many of you know, we've been advocating for some time for UHN to use properties that are currently vacant for affordable or supportive housing, and we're glad to see UHN making this commitment to affordable housing and to the health of the community. As we all know, this rapid modular housing is a response to a homelessness crisis that's been aggravating for many years. But I'm hoping that UHN and the housing provider will be approaching this initiative not just as an emergency response, but as a long-term initiative for building community. Some of the concerns I have are around design. I hope that this project will be designed in a way that that integrates the new housing into the area, the green space on the Bickle Center grounds, potentially the community garden that is starting at 17 Close Avenue. I know that some of my neighbors have proposed the idea of a walkthrough from Dunn to Close on the north end of the site. Yeah, we would like this to be done in a way that promotes inclusive community space rather than kind of fencing off a new development. We've all heard that good fences make good neighbors. My experience here has been that sometimes that's true and sometimes the opposite is true. I know that in my row of houses, the fact that we don't have any fences between our front yards has been a major factor in the sense of cohesion we have as a group of neighbors. So we hope that in design, there will be a balance between prioritizing privacy and designing the space in a way that encourages connection. As a UHN tenant here in Parkdale for almost 8 years now, I know that the autonomy that I've had in my space to choose what color to paint the walls, to pick fixtures, to plant a garden, to invite guests into my home in non-COVID times, has been a huge part of what's made me feel like I belong here, what's made me feel like a full member of the community. And I hope that tenants in the future supportive housing will likewise be supported in exercising agency to shape their own living spaces, indoor and outdoor. Sorry, just a sec.
Sure, no problem.
As again, I certainly hope that these new neighbors will be receiving excellent care and support. But beyond that, I also hope that that we can be involved in creating meaningful opportunities for our new neighbors to make this place home and to participate fully in our community. So I'm asking, please reach out to us as neighbors. I know that many of us want to welcome our new neighbors and understand the importance of establishing good relationships as a foundation to cooperate in resolving any difficulties that may arise in our shared space. Again, the concrete details will take shape over time. I don't know whether this probably looks like having some conversations about design of outdoor space and connections across the block. This probably involves some conversations about welcoming new neighbors to participate in the community garden that is just being set up right now. Might mean community barbecues, who knows what else. But yeah, I just wanted to express my welcome and my hope that we can work to make space for our new neighbors to participate fully in the community and take responsibility for our life as a community, as I have been supported to do. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Esther.
thank you, Esther. That was beautifully put. Thank you so much.
And Esther, I'll just reassure you that we do have some time in our agenda a little bit later on to think about other ways. You've suggested offering participation in the community garden, holding barbecues, and those are certainly things that the project team would like to hear more about in terms of how folks could support the success of this building. So thank you for those suggestions, and we can revisit that a little bit later on. We will also revisit in a few minutes, well, not revisit, we're going to visit for just a moment the plans for the site. I think that's the kind of question that's coming up is, what is this going to look like? And so I think what we'll do is turn our attention to those slides at this moment, and then we'll resume our discussion, and I'll continue to keep the speaking list. So to that end, I would like to invite Kevin Hutchinson from Montgomery Seism Architects, and Kevin is going to tell us all about the proposed plans for the site. So here we go, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane. So yeah, just in time, I think we're starting to get specific questions on this, so it's a good time to turn to these slides. The image you're seeing on the screen has north to its left, so the lake is to your right. Dunn Avenue is at the top, Close is at the bottom. The building footprint you are seeing is the thick blue line filled with solid orange. That is the proposed building footprint. It's about 20 meters deep and 40 meters across. It does sit in what is currently a parking lot. It encroaches a little bit beyond what is currently the paved area, but it is displacing parking spaces. I think currently in that area, there's about 33 parking spaces. This is displacing some of those. The main building face runs parallel to Dunn Avenue. It will have its main entrance on Dunn Avenue. The building is set back from the street to generally align with the houses to the south. So those houses have nice landscaped front yards. This building would continue that same pattern. We are looking at some rear yard amenity space dedicated to the residents of this building. You can see the line of the scope line kind of jogs back behind 82 Dunn. We are some of that rear yard space in order to provide dedicated high quality outdoor amenity space for these residents. In that backyard space, I think you can also see there's another more narrow solid band that is an ancillary building, which in this case includes long-term bike storage. Should say that waste holding is internalized within the building. And I think that's most of the items here. I don't think I forgot anything. Maybe we can go to the next slide.
Kevin, can I just encourage you to speak into your microphone a little bit more? You're a little bit muffled.
Yes, sorry about that. A full day of speaking on meetings has me speaking softly. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
So here we have a couple views of the built form. We are looking at 4 stories. The height generally descends from the Bickle Center, which is on the right or the north of both of these images. So the Bickle Center is a little bit taller. These 4 stories are a little bit shorter, and that starts to transition down to the neighborhood dwellings on the south. So in terms of height transition, we're stepping down to those houses, 4 stories overall. You can see on the front yard there is a pergola structure, so that's that wood structure over the stairs and the ramp, providing barrier-free access to the building. So that's kind of like a front porch element that scales down the building to the street, repeating the porches we see in the neighborhood. Similarly, you can see there's a wood recess, so there's a 4-story kind of void in the building. That is where the main entry occurs. So we've got a kind of tall entry to signify the entry position. The cladding we are contemplating right now is a combination of lap siding with cedar accents. So 2 tones of lap siding is what we are suggesting. And we are contemplating bringing some character to the building, perhaps with some colored blinds and some items like that. I think that would maybe be worth talking a little bit about further. If we go to the next slide as well. I think it's important for us, the modular housing piece is maybe a new term for some people, but modular construction is nothing new in the construction industry. We prefabricate all sorts of elements and then deliver them to site in larger or smaller pieces. The unique piece that we have here is that we're building an entire unit. So it's a larger piece of construction we're bringing to site prefabricated, but it is a very cost-effective, fast, and efficient way to build. And we've proven that concept in 2 phase 1 sites, one at Dovercourt and another at Macy, where it has worked very, very well. The important thing here for the community is that the houses are built off-site. So one of the great impacts we have is that we have a reduced amount of time on-site. So the construction generally takes 8 to 10 months, much of that occurring off-site. So the disruption to the neighborhood with active construction activity is much shorter than conventional construction. To the earlier point about durability and quality, one of the reasons we as architects like modular construction in particular is that these modules are built in a factory, so climate conditioned environments rather than putting a window flashing on in the cold blowing rain. We're doing it in the comfort of a factory where we can do it comfortably. We don't rush the jobs. We get much higher quality product when things are done in a factory setting. Maybe the next slide, please. These are 2 images of units that were built in phase 1, just to help us visualize what's included. So each unit, I think we talked about, has a private washroom and a private kitchen facility, so their own dedicated studio apartment with their own kitchen washroom. They have a modest sleeping area, living and dining area. They come furnished with bed, chair, dining table, dresser, and they also come with their own kitchen equipment as well. I think that's all my content. I hope I didn't miss anything.
Thank you, Kevin. And before we move back to the discussion, I would just like now to invite Dan Nicholson, who's the Manager of Community Planning with the City of Toronto, to share some information about the review and approval process and the timeline. Please go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Diana. So in terms of the planning review and approval process, the proposed project will require some relief from the zoning bylaw. So that's the bylaw that governs things like building height, setbacks, parking requirement, that sort of thing. And as well, there's a site plan approval process that we have to go through. And that's all about how the site is laid out. Things like where the parking goes, where the loading goes, storage, landscaping, all those sorts of things. So we require those two steps in order to get approval for the project. In terms of the process and how we move forward, so on June 28th, Planning and Housing Committee will consider a staff report recommending council endorse a request in principle to the province to make a ministerial zoning order to address any necessary zoning changes. So council will consider that report on July 14th. In terms of what an MZO is, and this is already discussed briefly, a ministerial zoning order, an MZO, enables the minister to regulate land use on specific lands and has been used to expedite time-sensitive projects. And of course, this is a time-sensitive project that we want to see move ahead without going through the full, fairly lengthy zoning approval process. So next slide, Diana. So in terms of the timeline, so here we are, June 16th at our virtual meeting. It's been mentioned there has been some consultation already to date with a number of residents. So as I mentioned, in June, later in June, there will be a report to the Planning and Housing Committee requesting that the province consider a ministerial zoning order. And that's a preliminary report, so it's a request in principle. And that will go to the July 14th council meeting, as has been mentioned. Then we'll deal with the detailed site plan analysis in the next few months. And we anticipate that in September, there will be a final report to the Planning and Housing Committee, September 21st, going on to council, September 30th, sorry, recommending that ministerial zoning order. And that needs to move ahead in order to allow the timelines for the project to be completed and to allow the residents to move in as anticipated March 22nd. And as also been mentioned, there is going to be a community liaison and communications throughout this period.
Great. Wonderful. Thanks very much, Dan, for that overview. So we're now going to go back to our speakers list, and I have David who's up next. So please go ahead, David.
Hi, I'm David Krielman. I live on Springhurst in one of the UHN houses. I have a lot of support for this project. I think it's an interesting idea. I think with good design, planning, and definitely lots of support when the project, these people are going to need a lot of support going forward, and that needs to be in place. But my concern is it is a big increase in density on this part of the block. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this, but the UHN property involving all of the houses that UHN owns here is also slated for development. And architects have not done any work yet on this, but it could involve removing all of the Victorian houses or expanding them greatly in some unknown form to create more affordable housing and increasing the density in the area more. So I know you might not want to link these two projects, but I just think for the impact on the community, it might be an idea to, in exchange for the community supporting this project, as long as it's good and well designed and can be made to fit into the community here, put a hold on the second phase of the project. Let this be built and let a time period go by where we get used to this and have more chance to analyze and welcome our new neighbors and get ready before the next stage. I would suggest after this project, simply put a hold on more development for a decade. And I think that's fair in a very complicated residential, but mixed, very confusing neighborhood that we live in. So I would like to put that as perhaps a bridge that maybe some people could rally behind as supporting this project, but being a little more cautious and putting a bit of a hold on the next one for a time period to let it all settle in. Otherwise, I think we're going to have another project within the next couple of years, right? And I think that's too much for this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any reflections there, Councillor Perks?
Sure. Hey, David. I don't know that I can commit to a 10-year holding bylaw, but like the conversation about the larger project, the second project, when you sort of work through the timelines, we'd have to do a community conversation on a whole secondary plan, which we've committed to. That takes a couple of years. Then there would have to be some site-specific stuff that would be a couple more years. And then there's construction. So you're looking at 5 to 10 years anyway. So I can't give you that condition that we'll build it and then stop. The number of places in the city where that exists, there might be 2 or 3 places with a holding bylaw on them saying no more building. It's just not common in the city of Toronto at all that we let somebody build something and then say none of the neighbors can build something otherwise. It's just not the way planning works.
All right.
Yeah, I think that a little bit of a window to see how things settle in is a good idea. I mean,
I'll think on that.
I see your point that the process itself has some time, but
yeah,
just to add 2 or 3 years in there to get everybody used to this, because there is some opposition. But if if the city can be a little reasonable about how fast the change comes, a lot of us are getting older. There's a lot.
I hear you.
The change is coming too fast, and that includes the residents of the UHN houses. I'm not in this case for anybody in particular, but it is kind of a shock, and that any development is a bit of a shock. So it'd be nice to have a little bit of a window between those 2 developments.
I hear you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. All right, we're going to go to our next guest, and that is William. William, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you very much. I am a tenant of UHN. I've been a tenant of the hospital for almost 30 years on Close Avenue, in housing that is market rental housing, by the way. It's not affordable housing. Just to correct that mistake. I share many of my neighbors' enthusiasm for bringing more housing into the block and for targeting it at people that are experiencing homelessness. However, there's some issues that I want to raise, and some of them are design issues. And I feel like I raised them in the meeting we had last week, and I see no impact on the design we just heard from the architect. So I feel kind of sad. I feel like our couple of hours of conversation had no impact. And so I feel kind of worried. Like I feel like maybe I should just not talk now and protest because there was no change. But I'm going to say it anyway, because I want other people that didn't hear me the first time to hear me. So there's been a long-term management of the houses that UHN owns that leaves houses empty and leaves property empty. And this has really negatively impacted the greater neighborhood, including the homeowners that I didn't realize. And so 1 in 3 and 82 now are sitting empty. And the logic of leaving them empty longer, I don't see it. They've been empty, some of them for 30 years. That's housing that's been lost. So if we're doing emergency housing, we're using emergency logic to get some housing on the ground, great, but it's $200,000 per 350 square foot apartment. And it's a lot cheaper to put some people in 82 right now. You can convert 1 and 3 into units the same size, 10 of them, for way less than $1 million. So the logic of leaving empty buildings is just means the neighborhood has to suffer with these houses that are falling down longer. So I just really think this project needs to be not seen as a one-of, because it's not a one-of. It's part of a larger redevelopment, as David said. So let's think about it that way. We can do it fast and still think about it that way. And that means designing something that fits into the neighborhood. So instead of the one giant building, put up 3 buildings side by side each other that look about the same size as the houses. Put the 4th floor set back so that it's cantilevered. It gives some shelter at the back of the house for a private space for the residents that's covered, but also lowers the front of the house so it looks more like houses. Because we don't want something that makes people feel like they're living in an extension of the hospital. Instead, we want people to feel like they live in houses. I know there's an issue with the elevator, but the problem, the city's own affordable rental housing design guidelines are excellent, but they're just not being followed in this project in any way. And one example is the long corridors and the lack of gathering spaces for the elevators. And that can be easily changed by just setting up 3 separate buildings that are bridged through bridges. You can still have 1 elevator shaft with a meeting area. The other piece, I think the units should be larger. I said that. I think every person has a right to 2 windows at least. I think that the floors and the cupboards need to be solid wood. I live in a building that's 140 years old, rented from the city, and the floors are great still, but they won't be. And you know who'll be blamed? It'll be the tenants. Will be blamed when I can see the housing material from the promotional materials, and I've worked in supportive housing for many years. I can see it's going to deteriorate what's in there. And then who's going to be blamed? The tenants. For when just better quality material will make a big difference. So I think that a human scale project that really ties into the existing neighborhood, that ties into the other houses, that the laneway is rethought so that it's public access to the building from the west side, so that people don't feel like they're just living in a little thing that is really just kind of not supposed to be in the neighborhood, but is stuck in the neighborhood. It's really built into the neighborhood. And so I just really feel like design matters. We can take an extra month to really figure out a design that fits better, because this one just doesn't fit right now. We need human scale building so that people can make this their home for 20 years like I've done, or 30 years like I've done, not for 1 or 2 years and then it just becomes unsupportable because you live in a building where you got to go past the staff to get in, then you take an elevator in a dark hallway up to your unit. Your unit's only 350 square feet and that's all you get. You get 1 window, you get to look out of it. Just let's not repeat the mistakes of the past in terms of housing people that are coming out of homelessness. Let's do a better job. The other piece that I want to add right now is that I would like to be part of a committee from the neighborhood that will be a welcoming committee for the residents. And so if we can imagine that, and honestly, people having fears is reasonable when there's change. I get that, even with my neighbors that have said things that I don't agree with, because I really do agree with Gord that housing is a human right. But change really does scare people. And so I get that. I get that. In my own household, we've had these discussions. But
Sure.
Let's have a welcoming committee. But honestly, if the city and UHN aren't going to talk to us about design, then I don't know what the point of these meetings is.
Okay, so William, I'll just, yeah, I think Kevin was wanting to respond there, and thank you for your comments. Please go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, hi, William. Thank you for bringing up those points again. So I should say we did take pretty thorough notes when we met with you last, and I think we were particularly excited in that meeting that we heard very specific comments on site plan related items, which usually these meetings don't involve discussion of cladding and quality of material and the height of the building and the setback and the quality of the spaces for the residents. So we are reacting to it. Unfortunately, maybe we have not made all those changes yet, but we are looking at some of those comments you had. I mean, there are comments beyond even what the ones you just repeated now. There are ones about proper access to daylight, meaningful uses for the outdoor amenity spaces, making sure we had sufficient indoor amenity spaces that could support a variety of programming functions to support the residents. The list was very long. I think you listed only 5 or 6 now, and I took note of 14 or 15 when we met. We are looking at those items. The same material that you're seeing tonight, I think, is very similar to what you saw previously, but there is definitely work happening in the background. But thank you again for your passion, and specifically your comments on these site plan related items. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, William. Oh, yeah, go ahead. We just want to make sure we're going on to the next folks. We still got quite a few folks who want to speak.
I know. Bill, I'm going to give you 2 jobs. One, thank you for volunteering to be part of the welcoming committee, and I'm very excited about making that happening. But can I put you and Kevin together and have a chat about some of this design stuff?
Sure.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Let's do that. Okay.
We'll look to you to set that up, Councillor Perks, and wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, William. All right, let's go to our next speaker, and that is Lisa. Lisa, please go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. I live on Dunn Avenue, right across from 150. I am highly skeptical of this development. I have 2 dogs. Every day I either walk by the Respite Center and Exhibition Place and or Liberty Village, and they are not great places by any means. There is garbage. There are people swearing. I have been accosted. There's human excrement, people shooting up and dropping needles. I just want to know what's going to give this structure on Dunn Avenue the gold star, how you guys are going to make it so great that the residents are going to love it. I'm also kind of curious on how many other sites you looked at before deciding that this was the place to put this modular housing.
Sure. Yeah, let me take that. So I agree with you. Respite and shelter care is substandard. It is not great. What anyone who has worked in housing will tell you is that giving people a permanent address with supports improves their quality of life and therefore improves the quality of life of the people around them. The whole idea here is to get away from the idea that we shove people into a temporary overnight situation and give them a place where they become a neighbor. That's our goal here. And like, I agree with you. We should not be relying on shelters and respites for people to get a roof over their head overnight. We should be building community, building lives, and supporting them. And that's the main difference.
But may I say that when these respite centers went in around our community, we were told that they were going to be great. There were supports, there was all this stuff, and it's just changed. Unfortunately, it makes, when I walk through those sidewalks, it makes the entire thing unsafe. So from the city saying, that this is like, these are great, we're going to give supports, we're going to do all this, and this is what you guys are saying now about the housing going in across the street. I'm just kind of confused, and I want to know who's going to take accountability if or when things go poorly.
Well, first of all, I am. And secondly, if I can just ask you to put this in your mind. Imagine that your relationship with your housing was every morning you had to leave and come back in and line up again. What kind of a neighbor would you be? You wouldn't be, it wouldn't be great. But if you have a permanent address, if you have people like Bill and Esther, who we've heard talking tonight, saying, I want to work with you to become neighbors and friends, then your outcomes in life, your health, your mental health, your relationships with people improve. And there is a ton of evidence that when you house people in a secure and safe way, they become better neighbors. It's when society doesn't offer people that stable and secure housing that why would you be a good neighbor, right? Society says to you, you don't get a roof over your head that you can count on. Why would you be a good neighbor? But when you say to people, no, we value you and we want you in our neighborhood, we're going to involve you in the community garden and the barbecues that Esther was talking about, suddenly people's mental health and physical health improve and their ability to be a good neighbor improves.
Okay,
and frankly, I feel enriched living in a community that has a variety of people with a variety of histories. So I think some of the problems you talk about with respite care, absolutely right, absolutely right. And what we're trying to do with this project is to end that problem and to actually build neighborhoods.
But Mr. Perks, just one last thing. Like, who's going to be accountable for this? I have called the police on many occasions for things happening. So at 2 a.m., we're going to call you when somebody's getting stabbed on the street or if there's a fight, because the police will not show up. Police in Parkdale is like, it's a non-thing. So is this modular housing going to have security? Is there going to be some workers on site 24 hours? Like, how are you going to keep the community safe while we transition?
So on that, a couple of things. First of all, every single piece of evidence in Canada, the United States, Europe, everywhere, is that when you provide people with housing, those kind of conflicts that you've described, they go down. They don't go up, they go down. Okay, so there's that. Secondly, if you're having specific concerns, you should be contacting me. Yes, absolutely. Always.
Okay, I think we're going to have to move on there. Thank you, Lisa.
Sorry, Diana, I just need to say a couple of things in response to the question. So, yes, there will be staff 24/7 on site who will have the necessary training and expertise. There will be a building phone number that any resident can contact for non-emergency purposes. So there will be good communication set up directly with the building should any issues arise. And we're really making sure that we pick the right operator for this building so that the staff and the programming and support that's delivered on site is appropriate, will meet the needs of residents, and will therefore integrate residents and the building into community successfully. So yes, I just want to confirm that there will definitely be staffing 24/7 on site, and many times overnight. That does include security staff that we've seen in some of the other buildings. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby. All right, we're going to go to our next guest, and that is for Edward. Hi there, Edward.
Oh, hi, how's it going? My name is Edouard Ratierson, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to ask a question on this social medicine initiative. I'm a homeowner and a parent of young children on Dunn Avenue, and I'm just echoing the previous sentiment that said that change is scary, and quite frankly, it's change, so it has that effect on us a little bit. And I wanted to just ask, due to the increased density, how will we make sure that we minimize any negative impacts on our streets and our community? That's it.
Good, Edward. Thanks. So there's a bunch of stuff. First of all, as Abby just described, one of the things we're asking for a not-for-profit that has experience working with populations of people who haven't been housed for a while to come forward. So we're going to have expertise on site, and that expertise will include people who can build relationships between you and your new neighbors, but also people who might have experience in dealing with people and some of the complex issues they bring if they've been homeless for a long time. So that'll be a piece of it. A second piece of it that I think is really, really critical for all of us to think about is imagine moving into a new neighborhood and everyone has a lawn sign saying, you know, don't let this new guy move in. That's not going to work. But if instead, as some of the people who live on Close and Dunn have said, let's go and build some relationships through community gardens and barbecues, you get to know them. Your kids get to know who your neighbors are. Yeah, you get to know who your neighbors are. And that actually builds, in my view, more safety for your kids. You've got more eyes on the street, more people who might say, hey, there goes Susie and Billy. I'll wave and say hello. Actually, I believe if you think about this site, there's a lot of sort of dead space around it where there aren't residential units, where there aren't neighbors you can count on to maybe say, you know, maybe you make sure that your kid doesn't chase a ball on the street in front of a car. So I think the first part of it is, yes, we will have supports. The second part of it is, and this is our collective duty, is if we build relationships, we strengthen the safety of everyone who lives in the neighborhood.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. So we are coming up to the remaining kind of 10 minutes of our time together. There are still several people who are wanting to talk. So I'm just going to encourage everybody to, if we can, keep your comments brief, because we want to make sure that we get to as many people as possible. And we'll aim to be finished. We may go a few minutes over just to accommodate folks, but just encourage everyone to kind of keep their comments and responses brief so we can make sure we hear from everyone. And next we have Claire. Claire, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So my name's Claire. I live on at 11 Close Avenue, and I would like to echo all that's been said about the importance of the housing being really high quality, well designed, long lasting materials, people being offered a choice of details like paint color, and definitely about the importance of community building, both within the building itself and also to facilitate new residents connecting with the larger community. And just from personal experience, I want to stress in particular importance of natural light in apartments, because the connection between natural light and mental health has been very well documented. And also, as someone who's volunteered for years as a community mediator, I cannot stress enough the importance of really high quality soundproofing to minimize a really common cause of acute stress and acute conflict within buildings. And I realize that people have expressed here differences of opinion regarding whether this housing should be built or not. But one area where I hope that all of us may have common ground is I really feel, as others have said, that it's in the best interest of all of us here for the housing to be as high quality as possible and for community building to be made a priority. Because if we put ourselves in the shoes of the most vulnerable of the new residents, you know, so say we're coping with mental health issues and the trauma that so often underlies them. If we live in homes that are beautiful and well designed and full of light and have peace and quiet, and if we feel connected to the community we live in, that makes our lives happier and more stable, and it makes us less likely to go into crisis or turn to drugs and alcohol to numb our pain or to break the law and steal stuff because we ran out of money for those drugs, right? And on the other hand, if we live in homes that look new and shiny when we moved in, but now the kitchen cupboards are falling apart because they were made of cheap particle board, and we hate the paint color, but nobody gave us a choice in the matter, and we just have a big argument with our neighbor because the sound of their TV is driving us up the wall. And if we don't feel connected to anybody except the professionals who are paid to support us, then that's not going to be good for our mental health, right? And any damage to our mental health can potentially have a ripple effect onto the well-being of others around us in our building, in our neighborhood, and in our whole city. So ultimately, you know, I think it's in the best interests of us all to have the building be as lovely as possible and the community connections as strongly supported as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire, for your comments. All right, let's go on to our next guest, and that is Vanessa. Hello, Vanessa, please go ahead. Oh, Vanessa, are you there? Vanessa? All right, perhaps you've stepped away from your computer. We'll go on to our next speaker, and that's Jack. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Jack Gibney. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jack. We can hear you, yes.
Okay, I've lived on Dunn Avenue now since 2008. When my wife and I first moved in, the house was in really bad shape. We lived through a renovation for the first couple of years, and we'd go out every night to get dinner in the bars and restaurants. We got to know the local people. I want to tell all of you high earners that are moving into Parkdale, these are sweet, kind people. Don't be afraid of them. The mentally ill are afraid of us. We are strong and powerful and scary to them. Be kind. Take a big piece of your heart and help out. Get to know these people. They're wonderful. The people of Parkdale, the long-time people who lived here, they're a little older. They're wonderful people. They're the salt of the earth. They're new Canadians, people that have built things. I renovated this house. I have now 5 apartments I rent out. All of our tenants earn way more than we do. When they move in, they're all scared of the neighborhood. I advise them to get to know people, say hello, walk down the street, say hello to everybody you meet. 2/3 of Parkdalians will say hello back. They're wonderful people. They're friendlier than anywhere else in the city. This is a really wonderful, safe neighborhood. It's inclusive. Gord, thank you for bringing this wonderful development to Parkdale and for my neighbors. Thank you.
Jack, you're a sweetheart.
And your shortest speech, too.
Thanks very much, Jack. All right, we're going to go to our next caller, and that is James. James, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. That was lovely. I want to echo the importance of what Tiffany said earlier. Indigenous people constitute about 15% of the homeless population, I understand, and I think if at all possible to prioritize that group would be really important. I have a couple of things. Living right next, I live on Close Avenue, right to the immediate south of the Bickle Center, and sometimes it's like living next to an industrial plant. It's noisy, trucks, deliveries, all hours of the night, construction that went on for years, really loud, aggressive lighting in the parking lot, and the housing is going to be built right in that area. And so I think a lot of consideration has to be given to noise and the loading, the lighting, and the parking, and how that interfaces with making that space really tolerable, because it's very difficult to live next door to the Bickle Center. Second,
James, that's fantastic advice. Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing is that I'm going to bring it up again, that black pointy hostile fence that lines the Bickle Center from the east and the west. I think that's a remnant from when it was the Victorian home of for incurables. I'm not sure, but can we get rid of that fence? I think it's time that could go away. And then I'm looking at the proposed building and its interface with the parking lot and the green space behind it. And it's not coherent. I don't understand, it looks like the parking lot goes right up against the building for one section, and then there's an opening to a somewhat disconnected green space at the back. it looks like the north end of the building is not accessible to the green space. It looks like a narrow walkway to the south to access the green space at the back. I don't, I think that some more thought has to be given to the parking and how that space is used. And so that it actually feels like a place where you live and not like you're not jammed up against a parking lot and against a loading dock and industrial area. I think that was all I want to say. I support the, oh, the last thing is I looked at the kitchen picture. There's no counter space for, like you have a microwave and that's about it on the counter space. They're tiny, tiny counter spaces. I don't know how anybody's supposed to cook in those units. And I think that speaks to William's point about the size being very small and not really like, is this really a long-term home for somebody, or is this like a crisis unit that's being thrown up in a quick find because there's lots of money for it, and we're gonna, you know, get some numbers down. Thank you.
James, that's really helpful. And in the conversation that Kevin and Bill and I am going to have, we'll capture that. Thank you.
Thanks, James. All right, we'll go to our next guest, and that is Iris. Hi, Iris. Please go ahead. Iris, can you hear us? Oh, Iris, you may have stepped away from your computer or phone. All right, sorry, Iris, we're going to move on to our next caller, and the next person is the matriarchal circle.
Hello?
Hi there.
You can hear me?
We can hear you, yes. What was your name?
Hi, my name is Catherine Gandy. I am a part of Matriarchal Circle. I'm one of the founders, and we're an Indigenous woman and Two-Spirit-led advocacy group. And so I'm not sure if this was mentioned previously. I do see from the City of Toronto's website that there will be Indigenous peoples that will be moving into this new housing development. My concern is, and it's also in relation to the greater aspects of the lack of proper consultation with Indigenous community members, because currently, as it stands, the housing secretariat meetings with the Indigenous service providers does not allow for all of the voices to be heard. And it's particularly concerning because there are systemic gaps that have been in place for several decades. And the majority of the people that are being directly impacted don't have a voice. So with mention of the Indigenous peoples that are houseless right now, I think it's congruent for the Housing Secretariat Office and as well for the City of Toronto overall to consult with the peoples. And similar to how the Aboriginal Affairs Committee is run, where it's live on YouTube, I believe that the Housing Secretariat meetings with the Indigenous service providers should be available for the viewing of Indigenous community members on YouTube as well. And I just wanted to know, lastly, what consultation has happened thus far with Indigenous service providers in terms of ensuring the safety, the harm reduction aspect of potential Indigenous houseless folks. Chimigwech Kukshtiem.
Thank you, Catherine. Abby, did you want to follow up for that?
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, for joining us today. I think it would be great to have a further discussion with you about some of your concerns. we are, like I said, we are having regular discussions with some of the Indigenous housing providers and hoping to strike a memorandum of understanding with them. And so I can certainly raise the request to have some of those meetings be more either open to the public or be publicly accessible. But I think in relation to your questions about harm reduction and how we ensure that the services here are meet the needs of Indigenous homeless residents, I think we'd love to hear from you, and perhaps if you can make sure that you provide us with further contact information, we'll do some follow-up discussions with you if that's possible, if you're open to that.
Well, thank you. And because of the high rates of intergenerational trauma that my people are facing right now, it's really incumbent that the Indigenous service providers make space for grassroots peoples, because it's not only matriarchal circle that is involved with this work, it's also the Indigenous harm reduction group, which is located right in Parkdale. So in terms of engagement, it is crucial that now there is a shift within the original status quo of the City of Toronto consulting with Indigenous service providers. They're not always on the ground. They don't know what the key ongoing issues are. And I'd love to further this conversation to ensure that the Indigenous peoples that are going to be moving in will have the resources that they need, and also that's and I've been listening, you know, there are concerns of what is currently transpiring in the neighborhood, and I feel as though that a town hall meeting would open things up, not just for Indigenous people, but current residents, homeowners, and as well as other marginalized, oppressed groups that will be moving in. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's have that chat. Let's do that.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. We'll look to arrange it to follow up with you, and we've taken down your organization and your name. Thanks. Okay, and our final caller this evening is Michelle. So Michelle, please go ahead.
Oh, wow. I'm glad that I made it online. I'm actually an ex-Parkdale member, but I still think I'm part of Parkdale. I grew up there for the last just over 30 years. And I have elder family members who still live there, and I still visit regularly. And I don't know if this was mentioned earlier, but as things progress, will there be more discussion around how one qualifies for this housing? Particularly, I'm calling in to advocate on behalf of my own family member, and I'm a social worker myself, and I've helped with getting with securing housing for clients in the neighborhood. And you know, I wanted to also comment and say that I hear what a lot of folks are saying about some of the not so nice things that you might see in the neighborhood. I grew up there. I saw all of what you're talking about. There was no mention of bed bugs and roach infestations, which I also lived through. But I've also lived through seeing a very strong neighborhood as well, a very close-knit neighborhood, and one that I felt safe living in and growing up in, along with my young siblings as well. So curious to know what's the plan for how these 51 units are going to be shared.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So I can't give you the whole picture yet, but the idea is we're asking not-for-profit housing providers to sort of come forward and make offers for what they'd like to do here, right? So and then we'll pick one. And that one, no matter who it is, isn't going to meet everybody's needs, right? They may have a particular specialty. They won't meet everyone's needs. But the good news is this is just one of several projects. We've got the property at 11 Brock. Write that down, Abby. And we've got the Parkdale Hub, We've got a couple of other projects that we're looking at with the land trust. So the idea is we're going to have many different projects with many different providers and try to cover a whole lot of different needs that way.
Gord, I have to say that sounds amazing, and I'm part of the CAMH group in terms of my work and background. That's where I do my social work, and I have to say that it's really important that we make sure that the neighborhood is maintained in such a way where there's diversity in terms of race, diversity in terms of needs, and that, yes, I've always known that Parkdale has supported a lot of individuals with mental health issues in the past and continues to do so, substance use concerns, all sorts of struggles that our folks have worked through over the years. And I think that's important that we continue to embrace, but at the same time, it's also very important to make sure that our communities are maintained in a diverse way, because that we've grown up, there's lots of families, lots of elderly communities, and I'd like to see that diversity maintained and maintain a balance.
That's why Parkdale is the best place in Toronto, right?
I agree. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great.
Thanks, Michelle. And actually, there was somebody who had kept dropping off and returning, so I think we'll let Robert have the last say here this evening. So Robert, hi there. Please go ahead, Robert. You're our last guest this evening.
Hi, yes, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and all the different comments from all the people that live here in Parkdale. I've been a Parkdale resident for over 25 years now, and I do enjoy the diversity without a doubt. I'd like to reiterate just a couple of the comments and then ask Gord. Diana, you've done a great job of moderating. Thank you. The first thing is what Williams and James said about it's sort of, I agree wholeheartedly that it does not look, it looks like a box next to another big box, 4 stories high, when all the other houses are not more than 3 stories high. It does need some character, I feel. It does need some to look like houses that will fulfill the neighborhood. I feel that the design element is just you know, not friendly at all. I know that you're talking about putting some cedar siding on it and doing all that, but really it just looks like a big box and another big sort of tower that we already have on Jameson Avenue, where it's just filled with that. So if we somehow could make it so it's more friendly, more accepting, more part of the community, more part of the neighborhood, when it comes to with the Victorian houses, and I don't know how you do that with modular housing. I'm not even sure it's possible, but you know, I think that would be helpful. I also think that it towers over the street. It's too close to the street, that there's no sort of green space in front of it. Huge parking lot behind it. I don't know why you can't move it farther back and have some green space in front of it to welcome people, or to at least make it more welcoming. I do have to agree with Susie's, and I support what Susie has said. I'm a homeowner here, and I do feel, number one is there has been a bit of a lack of transparency. Sorry, Gord. I disagree with what we had said. We got the notice about a week and a half ago. That's the first any of us heard of this that I've talked to on the street. So maybe you've gone about it in other ways of notifying the community. I'm not sure how you went about it, but that is our biggest problem. The second issue that Susie brought up, which I completely agree with, is the 10-to-1 ratio. Now that ratio might be off, but you know, it's real. And bringing this into the neighborhood is, you know, Gord, your vision of how people live, and if they're part of the neighborhood and, you know, they're part of a community, the problem is if you dilute that community, right, which is what you're doing, and bringing in such a high density of housing in one area brings us to a Regent Park scenario or a Jane on Finch scenario, because it's really not part of the community. Where this should go is in areas that are high in residential areas, or we already have done our share in South Parkdale. We've already housed and helped many people, which makes the community what it is. And I totally agree with that. And that's why I moved here and that's why I love it. But I just feel that there is that we're going to throw off that balance that we have. And especially if you're planning on doing more of these houses, taking away those Victorian houses that UHN owns as well. So that's, to me, very concerning on your future plans, which fit into what some of the people have been speaking, some of the residents that live here have been speaking about at the beginning. So Gord, if I could, sorry for my long-winded sort of ample,
No,
but
it's
Gord,
good.
if you
All
could
good.
talk to the ratio, the density and the ratio that we came up with in this 2-block area of a 10-to-1, and how your vision, I just don't see your vision happening with such a high density. I'm sorry.
Sure. No,
Yeah, thank you.
Robert, all good, all good. So let's take those in 2 pieces. So the first piece is the idea of a 4-story building, close up, right? If you go through anywhere in the old city of Toronto, you will find 4-story walk-ups everywhere. It's just part of the fabric of the city. In like I could throw a rock from my place and hit 3 of them. So I'm not worried about the 4-story element. When you talk about the ratio, I have to step back and ask myself a question. Ratio of what to what, right? And if the ratio is people who have the means to own their own property to people who don't have the means to own their own property, I've got to differ with you there. I've just got to differ. There are communities in the city of Toronto, communities in North America, communities in Europe, where, you know, it's 90-to-1 renters, or 90-to-10 renters, or 90-to-10 homeowners. And I actually find the communities which are 90-to-10 renters to homeowners more exciting. I think of those really sterile subdivisions where everyone, you know, has a 3-story house sitting with a giant front lawn and a backyard, and they park their car in front of a garage. I don't think those are the greatest places to live, and I don't think that's why you came to Parkdale. So when you're talking about the ratio, I push back on that a little bit, and I say these are human beings. Every human being has the potential to be a great neighbor. I don't worry about whether they have the money to buy their own home. I don't worry about whether something in their history meant that they had a period of homelessness. I don't worry about that. I worry about whether we as a community are a community that says we welcome all kinds, or whether we're a community that says I only want people like me. In terms of how we plan communities, we think about how we build the physical buildings so that there's light on the sidewalk. We think about whether there are pathways to walk between buildings. We think about whether there's park space. Those are what we call built form. And I'm intensely interested in getting those questions right. What I don't worry about, because I have trust in human beings, is who those people are. I think if we make a commitment to each other that everyone is welcome and we will be welcoming, we build a better neighborhood. I think if we don't make that commitment and say certain people aren't welcome, we make a bad neighborhood.
All right, so thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Perks. Thank you, Robert. And we have come to the meeting close. Before we do, are there any closing remarks that you'd like to share, Councillor Perks, with the group before we share this contact information?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who took the time It's a beautiful evening, but Parkdale's a beautiful place and it's worth spending the evening thinking about it. I heard some great stuff that we're going to pursue about the quality of the place and some of the design stuff, and I've got some commitments there. Thank you all for giving your time. Go enjoy the rest of this great June evening. We'll talk soon.
And just before we part ways, could I ask Mercedes if you could bring that up again? If there are things that folks think about following this meeting, these are the two ways that, two of many ways that you can be in touch. And so please feel free to send an email or call the community liaison at these contact informations. And Councillor Perks has also offered his phone number and email, and everyone is welcome to contact Councillor Perks as well further to our meeting this evening. So thank you again on behalf of everyone. Thank you to our panelists and presenters and to our guests and speakers this evening. Be safe, and we hope to connect and cross paths again in the very near future. Good night.